Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to the Feminist Futures Institute. I missed you all last week, even as I got some much needed birthday rest. And a special thank you to Women's March's own Kate Shapiro for stepping in for me last week. Um, for folks who don't know me, I'm Tamika Middleton. I am the Deputy Director here at Women's March. I am joining this evening from East Point, Georgia, the land of Muskogee Creek Nation. This week is our week, 6 of 8. Last week, you all got to meet Lydia XZ Brown and Corrine Luck. We learned about the feminist economy and an economy of care. We looked at the gendered expectations of work, talked about intersectionality and specifically the intersections of ableism, racism, and gender-based discrimination. And we started talking about visioning for the future. What does justice and freedom look, feel, and taste like? If you missed it, you can check out last week's episode as well as all the past episodes at womensmarch.com/feminist futures. Over the next few weeks, we will continue to explore how did we get here and where do we go from here. So we'll listen from and learn about everyday women across history who've navigated these waters before, and we'll radically envision where we go from here. Today's session, I am so excited to witness this conversation on global solidarity that's going to be led by Clelia Rodríguez and Thenjiwe McHarris. And we'll continue to explore where and how you fit into these stories and these teachings that Clelia and Thenjiwe will share. So stay tuned and we will start the conversation shortly. See you soon.
Mari Mari Lamen, Mari Mari Campuche. I greet all of you and your ancestors, the ones that are beside you, the ones that came before you, the ones that continue to guide you, whether it's from the darkness or from the light. I have candle lit here because I continue to be grounded in shared indigenous values, and where I stand, where I join you from, is from ancestral territory of the Anishinaabe people, also known as Canada, stolen land. And these shared values are going to ground us tonight. And these values are love, courage, bravery, truth, respect, wisdom, acknowledge, and also humanity. And it is in the name of these 7 teaching grounded principles that we have from our grandfathers and the Anishinaabe share indigenous values that I introduce myself. I am Clelia. I am the daughter and the granddaughter of farmers, proud campesina from what is known today as El Salvador. I am a global scholar. I am a mom. I am an auntie. I'm a mentor. I'm a cook. I'm a gardener. And I knit. And this knitting that I have here, that I have been weaving stories, is how I would like to weave the knowledge that does not belong to me, that it doesn't belong to you, but it's knowledge that has been passed on to me. This knowledge that we share with you respectfully tonight, it is not to be stolen, it is not to be appropriated, it is not to be disrespected. They are going to be seeds that are going to be shared with you for you to protect, to guard, to plant, to water, to sustain. And in patience, you then will be given the chance and the space to share them, to disseminate them, to cross-pollinate. So Thenjiwe, it is my honor that our ancestors are having a party tonight from wherever they are. And it is an honor to be with you, sharing this space tonight.
Thank you, Clelia. First, so much love and peace and greetings to everybody who is with us right now. And as Clelia shared, the ancestors and guides and spirits that stay with us and continue to guide us and lead us. It's always such a blessing too to be in space with you, Clelia. It moves me that I've never shared space with you. That we've met each other virtually, because clearly there's something about our ancestors and also just you and how you hold and are and move through space that's so beautiful and powerful. So I feel really honored, and even more than that, blessed to have a conversation with you, a discussion to unearth things within us about this moment, this time, and what does it mean to be in the world together, and what is our role in this moment. My name is Thenjiwe McHarris. I always start by saying I'm a Black organizer. I'm someone that believes deeply in building movement, deeply in the concept of resistance, one that is grounded in liberation, but centered around love and belonging and community. And I'll speak about it in a little bit, but I am the great granddaughter of some very powerful women in my ancestry. And I'm also a twin sister, which I often talk about. Her name is Tanisha McHarris. I entered into the earth with her, and so she's definitely also one of my teachers. So I'll stop there with introductions. There's always more or less, but I'm moved to begin a conversation with you, Clelia. So
Just the fact that you just share that you have a twin sister, that there were two seeds in your mother's womb, and that you got to co-share with another being, the first refuge, which is the womb of our mothers, the womb of earth. It is now to me, my heart now is filled with joy, because when we met, with some of the things that I have been weaving into this space is this idea of braiding, and how we come together and as roots. And I'm just radically happy right now, and it is now in the name of that joy, in the name of that radical joy, that I proposed a question to you last week. And this is a question that I would like everyone to think about and to feel, to remember. Think about this question as doing an archaeological self-digging. And the question that I propose to Thenjiwe, and that I propose everyone that is present today, is: what is the most important text in your life that grounds you into the work to change, to work to liberate, the work to emancipate, the work to whatever other English words out there? So thank you. That continues to be my invitation to you. And I don't know if you had time to think about that.
I did. I did. And I also chose to think about it in the way that you invited me into, which is to let myself be called into what it was, as opposed to searching. And as I was thinking about it, and I oftentimes near water, what came to me over and over again, and oftentimes what always comes to me is my great grandmother's. It's where I begin, but it's also where I return. And there's often never really a something that in which I'm moved to spirit, in which I am not anchored in sort of the teachings, the lessons, but also like the feelings, the ideas, the desires, the needs of my great grandmothers. And So sort of that's, and I can talk more about it, but that's what holds me, you know. I in my mind, the way I think about it, it's where I begin and it's where I return, and it's also the story of who I am. And you know, I'll also say my grandmothers were my first teachers, in multiple different ways, and so that's what was in my heart and in my spirit, when you, after just sitting with or holding the question that you shared with me. And I can share more, but
what are their names? Say their names. Claim their names.
So my great, and they're there. That's my great grandmother, Dada, and my great grandmother Rosina Gordon. Both lived in Jamaica, and I grew up in the Bronx. And the one on the left, it's actually her. She's in her wedding dress, and she helped raise me in when I was living in the Bronx. And I often start with my great grandmother, and oftentimes my great grandmother Rosina. We called her Rose, and I called her my first teacher because she taught me so much. I mean, I witnessed what Blackness meant, what it meant to be a Black woman, what it meant to be a Black woman that thought about Black people everywhere, but also what it meant to be a Black woman who was always in deep desire to not just to protect her own body and spirit, but the body and spirit of her children, of her kin, through my great grandmothers. And Rosina, my great grandmother Rose, is the grandmother who raised me when I was a very young person. And they also taught me the story of forced removal and forced migration, and that sort of the idea of Blackness, the idea of Black liberation can never be concentrated or singled out to one particular body of people or community or area in the world. That Blackness is a global, sort of a global political identity. That Black liberation is in its foundation and in its beginning a global. And so there's no way in which you can resist or be have the spirit of Black liberation in one place and not really be grounded in the reality that Black liberation is global. And so that's when I talk about my grandmothers as teachers. You know, like my first classroom was her kitchen, you know, and it was also the ways in which she made ackee and saltfish, or she made rice and peas. I mean, she taught me about, and you know, there's always so many stories about Blackness that are projected on television or that we're forced to consume by mass media, one of violence and suffering. But my grandmothers taught me the meaning of survival in the most beautiful way, but also like the power and beauty of a Black rebellious heart, and that there is actually nothing that will rid your body or your spirit of like the Black rebellious energy that you were born in. And I saw that within my grandmothers, despite and in spite, in the midst of everything that they went through. They showed me that like no one can rid you of the power of who you are, and the rebellious of your spirit is actually where your magic comes from. And so that's always been my foundation. I think that'll always be my foundation. And I always feel them with me.
So as you know, I was born and raised in what is known today as El Salvador. And in El Salvador, in 1932, we had a genocide of indigenous people, some of which are my descendants. In El Salvador also, there's been systemically, the government, by just legislation, have literally written in history, in the historical books, that there were never Black people in El Salvador. Today, in 1932, the 32,000 indigenous people that were killed so that in the future, today, for example, we could say that there's no indigenous people in El Salvador. And nothing can be more wrong or false. The the coffee bean that you see here in the screen, as a child, became my most important text. I did not know why, but I felt the reason why. In this name of coffee, foreign families sent to kill these 32,000, more than 32,000 indigenous people in El Salvador, because they wanted to cultivate the coffee in the most climatically well soil to cultivate coffee. So when I drink coffee every single day, I wish that I could experience the same stomach orgasm like everybody else.
Mm.
And every single morning that I get to drink coffee, my throat becomes the passage for blood, for pain, for history, for anti-Blackness, for anti-indigeneity, for colonialism. That is my first taste in the morning. And when you were talking about your grandmothers, particularly Rose, for some reason, my feeling, my self-digging to my own archive went into this dream that what would have happened if you and I say we're kids friends, if we maybe were childhood friends, if we maybe share the affinity of playing in a playground. And I say this to you as something to think about, because I now wonder, particularly during this time where everything feels extraordinarily painful, even though Black, racialized, and indigenous people, the pandemic was just something else that was happening in our lives. It was not that much of a difference from the war that we've had since 1492. And now I cannot help to wonder what, as a child, I would say to your inner child. If we were just kids and we were just having conversation and exchanging these stories and those histories. And if this is an invitation for everyone else that is listening to us, what would you say to that inner child? Like, I think about what would I say to that inner child who got to carry the heaviest coffee bean in the world.
I always think your questions are so powerful, and it's I often need just time to reflect, and also, and I do want to respond to that, but you just shared a few things that are inspiring thoughts within me. The one is just even talking about El Salvador, the history in El Salvador, and the black and indigenous sort of relations and like the significance of that, and going through the history of El Salvador. And there's so many histories, Honduras, around the world, and with whether it's Canada or where I'm based within the US, where there's so many deeply interconnected, intertwined stories, that it's important that we look towards history to understand like why it's so significant, that there are like actually there's deeply powerful binding relationships between Black and indigenous movements and communities, and that we come from a legacy of that is actually not something we have to invent or renew, but that we're actually carrying on a part of history is so important. And then the other thing that you talked about around the coffee bean, and oftentimes we talk about how we are loving each other, how we are in relationship to people in different parts of the world. And the way you talked about just what it's like when you drink coffee, you know, what happens to you, to your body, to your spirit. And also, but what does it mean that so many people, we consume so many things around the planet that has a history or a current current relationship to violence, to harm, to violence, to suffering. And oftentimes there's so much desire to consume without a real sort of sense of responsibility to what it has meant to those in which the origins of what you're consuming has come from. And so there's something about that just, I don't know, I appreciate you just sharing that, and it's just sitting with me. How like love, it feels complicated, but it's essentially a question of how much are you willing to open yourself up, and how deep are you willing to go to show and be in service in a way that frees you. And that's not just about what we say and what we do, but it's also about like what we choose to put into our bodies, what we choose to consume. And of course, as a result of capitalism, we consume things without feeling like we have an obligation to where they come from. And to the inner child piece, I love this question because, I always think about, what about the babies coming after us? Like there is no time really, but if we think about it, of course we're in the present, and we think about our ancestors. If we are a manifestations of their needs, their desires, their dreams, their visions, all of it. And then what is our responsibility to future generations of young people who will come after us? And if I think about them, it's like, what would I say to a younger version of myself? And I think the first thing that came to mind to me is there are things in which we have to resist in order to fully love ourselves and each other. And they are the stories that we are told, or what is pushed upon us to make us fall out of love with the core of who we are, our rebellious energy, our Blackness, our femininity, our womanhood, the things that make us powerful. We are taught at a young age to reject, and then we are also taught to segregation at young as young people. We are isolated. We are taught divisions and all of these things because of the world we live in. And while that happens, we are also taught, because of like our great grandmothers, something that is radically different and based on love, that we are all interconnected, and that we should love ourselves. So I think if I was a young person, I would say, listen to your grandmothers, listen to your grandmas, and quiet the noise around you, because for what's coming will need you to expand. Yes, we'll need your heart to expand in ways to prepare you for what's coming. And I'll just say, there's a quote that always sits with me, or ever since I've heard it, it lives in me in terms of me thinking about what do I do with the time that I have here. And it is a Frantz Fanon quote. It's essentially, it's each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. And I think about that in a way in which it's there is so much to living and breathing on this planet that is about our loving who came before us, and then choosing to love powerfully those that will come after us, and thinking about how are we in service of those coming after us. And then also knowing that purpose is oftentimes thought about in a hyper individualized way, but if we are interconnected, then why is it's our collective shared purpose. So then I think about you and I in a playground. It's like, how do we ready ourselves as children and babies to like be of service for our generational purpose? So we can think about the young babies that are coming after us.
You mentioned a couple of times the word love, and within this context of global solidarity, now that every institution now is like running, like if it was a sprint, a competition to check on the boxes of diversity, including, and et cetera, whatever words they want to use. It's a lie. It's not happening. It's not happening. In October 16th, in Honduras, in the northern part of Honduras, a few white men
Mm.
got together in Sweden or in Switzerland, I believe. And the northern part of Honduras went up for sale like an auction.
Mm.
There is 120 families that literally today, this morning, were evicted from traditional lands, traditional Lenca territory that borders between Honduras and El Salvador. In 2 or 3 weeks, you're gonna have, or maybe more in 3 months, because it takes 3 months from the time that you leave Central America to the time that you reach the border. It takes approximately 3 months, that journey. So in 3 months, in January, February, you're going to see a lot of refugees knocking on the doors of the United States. And when I think about love, for example, as I understand it from an ancestral perspective, comes from this idea of radical love, that I do not have to like you and that you do not have to like me on an individual level to be in affinity and in solidarity and in companionship and standing beside me shoulder to shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
That is radical love.
Mm.
And in this coffee bean, there is absolutely nothing that I don't do without having this coffee bean in my hand, because it reminds me about the community, every single person that has made sure that I'm alive today. And if we were in the playground, for example, like if we were playing tag or whatever, I would literally just be so happy that I get to play not with an imaginary friend, not with the imaginary friends that I had that was forced to live in El Salvador during the Civil War, but a real friend, someone that I can touch and that I can be in touch and in community with. And during these times that we have been detached from the right to touch one another, I wonder, our hearts, if we stop going to the gym and we lost muscle weight during these past 2 years, particularly those of you, and I've lost family members to COVID as well. And during these past 2 years, when I think about the muscle that I lost in my body, I cannot help to wonder if we were able to do an MRI that will allow us to see how much our heart grew because we came to touch through compassion and through radical love, through collective power, through community power. I wonder what that MRI test will say about each of us.
Wow. You just inspired so many different thoughts in me, and even just the piece around the heart. Were you finished, or did I?
No, I'm being, yeah, yes. Thank
You
you.
just inspired something about the heart is that, because oftentimes, it's, and I agree with you, like what so many people who've already been suffering around the world, what they had is like an intensification, but not an introduction to like harm and like, and the loss of our people, so there's a moment where it's intensified, and people experience loss, like, and there's something very heartbreaking about losing loved ones that you can't touch them, or at least you're not allowed to touch them, and how in those moments that there was no other choice but love, like, because in those moments you're pushed up against the wall because you're inflicted with violence, you are inflicted with the loss of loved ones, your heart breaks, and you're in a world in which power is consolidated in such a way that does anger you. So then there's the presence of frustration, rage, anger, and which is real and righteous. And in those moments, like, what will guide us and provide us with enough strength to hope, and enough hope to even think about vision, and how to how to respond in a way that is grounded in what you need and what we need, is through like a deep, unending form of radical love, which in a lot of ways is transformative. So this piece around, like, how much have we grown, and also we had to connect. We are learning how to connect with each other without being with each other, which is powerful. So if we think about generations ahead, and we believe that the humans, like, we are resilient and resilient, loving people, then what does that mean for the ways in which we will find a way to love each other, no matter what? And if we look at it, so that for me is like, it filled me with a lot of hope. I don't know if it filled others who were listening. And the other piece is, like, what you talked about earlier, is about, like, and not to go back super early, but, like, global solidarity has become like a catchphrase that means absolutely nothing, and it is corporatized, and or it's popularity without, something that we've said in other spaces, like, if your popular gains outpace your own development, your own understanding, your own depth and deepening, it will be co-opted, and it'll become something that will be used against you, as opposed to what actual advance what's in service of what the community needs, and the earth needs. And I think that's been happening around, happened around internationalism, global solidarity for decades, in ways in which it doesn't carry the significance and meaning that is grounded in. And I love the way you talk about shoulder to shoulder, because in my mind, what comes is protect and defend. Like that's like to love is to say, I will not leave you, and you will not leave me. That this is like, there's something. It is our divine duty and our moral, spiritual obligation to not leave you, and you not leave me at the mercy of those who are trying to destroy us. That is not, that does not even, there's no way in which that could happen. And that is at the heart of it. That is global solidarity. It's like, I love you, and it's love. And it's also, and it's protecting the defend. It's like, I love you, that I need you, and I want you to survive. And I want not just your body to survive, I want all of you to survive. I want your spiritual survival. I want the legacy of you to carry on. Like, and I'm willing to protect and defend that, just as you are. And until that sits at the heart of anyone who's thinking about global solidarity, then we don't have global solidarity. What we have is something that has been has lost its meaning, has lost its soul. And there's nothing worse than the perversion of something beautiful, And I think that's like the I think a lot of it, and some who identify or try to think about internationalism, global solidarity, Pan-Africanism, all of these things is the heart and the soul of these things that are just so important. So anyway, I just like appreciate the way you said that. Yeah.
And now you're making me think about, so for me, charity is, I want to swear, but I will not. And I'm also thinking about the earth, because you mentioned the earth, and last week, all these political leaders, met up to talk about like how they're going to reduce the damage to the climate. And I often keep hearing people saying, we have to save the earth. That's colonialist to say that we are going to save the earth. The earth does not need saving. Our bodies do not need saving. What we need urgently is to start thinking and feeling about notions of respect.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't need to come, that's why people talk about like white savior complex.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's think about how, as Black and Indigenous and racialist people, we speak and also operate under that banner.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, we just continue recycling
Mm-hmm.
these notions of change. However,
Mm.
if, for example, in the United States, the liberal people in the United States, whatever race, religion, sexuality, orientation, whatever, understanding that luxury and individuality in the United States
Mm.
is oppressing
Mm-hmm.
people, for example, in Honduras, like where fruit comes from.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about like, I had a conversation with a friend of mine last week, and she said, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to just like stop buying? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, what do you want me to do? Like stop like being addicted to the gadgets and whatever, and like start playing with my kids? Yeah. It is that simple, and it is that complicated.
And oh, sorry, I just was going to jump in, but I mean, I think that's the heart of it, and it goes back to even what you're saying about our relationship to the earth. Is part of the ways in which we populate, like people have been controlled, is people are now defined based on what they can consume, and having no limitations to what they can buy, how much of it, and so where we have, it's essentially in a ways in which it's an attempt to dehumanize. It's like you're dehumanizing whole people, and there's no way you can dehumanize people without dehumanizing yourself. Like you lose your own humanity. Somebody, an elder once told me, it's like every time you walk past someone who is suffering, who you can, it's very clear they don't have a home, whatever, and you look away, there's a part of your humanity that you give away every single time. And so there's a way in which I think like overconsumption, like the fact that people, the logic that not that they are no longer able to buy a thing that they like, is so challenging for so many millions of people to understand, and they're so connected to what they have as opposed to like who they are, and something that's even bigger than what sits on your table or what you choose to eat, which is like who you choose to be in the world, and how you, and like also how you relate to so many people in the world around you and not around you, is just, I think, some of the work that needs to be done. And it just this comment around, and I know we have to go to questions around the earth, respecting the earth. We've created, and how is colonial saving the planet? It's just this colonial logic. The earth is changing because we have not respected. There has been no respect given to it. So the earth is changing, and so there's a framing that we have to save the planet. Because of what has happened throughout human history, the planet is no longer becoming hospitable for human beings. And so what we're really, we talk about saving the planet, but the reality is it's about changing human behavior so that future generations have a planet to inherit, because the planet will continue in different form, in different shape, whether or not we are there. In the legacy of those that come after us will also have a planet to have. I mean, that's the battle, that's the struggle. But I appreciate what you said, is that the framing of it is very colonial, and we have to challenge that logic, because I think that logic is what got us here in the first place.
Just to quickly respond before I think we go into questions. My grandfather, who watches over me, he used to ask me in Spanish this question of, what kind of student do you want to be? What kind of educator do you want to be? And before he passed away, one of the things that he offered me in a question was, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? And I want to leave the question to transition into, no pun intended, into the questions or feelings or reactions or thoughts or dreams that the collective that is with us today is would like to share with us.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think that is like, that's the question. So I appreciate you. Any other thoughts you have? I mean, I think that that's such a profound question. I think that's also the question that we all should hold, you know, as individuals, but also as collectives of like organizations, people who are in this in the world and trying to challenge structures or build something that is life affirming and alternatives that actually address what our people need and challenge the things that are creating harms. Um, yeah, that what is the legacy that you're leaving behind? And also like anything, you know, I heard this a long time, anything worth doing is something that you don't fully experience all of it in your lifetime. They're actually for generations after you. And so within that, it's like what do you want to leave behind? What is the type of ancestor you want to be? Which I feel like, I don't know if there's a more beautiful question than that. And I know since you've posed the question, is there thoughts that you have in your own reflections on the type of ancestor you want to be?
I am I cultivate those offerings and those seeds through my gardening, through cooking, through knitting, um, through movement, when I dream, when I have nightmares, because the binary or the restrictions or the specifics in which the logic of capitalism or patriarchal society, etc., the only options that we get from that binary is one or two, left or right, like black or white. So when I think about the kind of ancestor that I'm preparing myself to be,
Mm,
is one in which I welcome diversity in colors, in lights, in different shades, um, by allowing my mind and in my heart to be promiscuous,
mm,
to embrace the fact that I will not drown in the sea
mm,
because I'm a fish, that I will not ever be buried by capitalism or by colonialism because I'm a seed and I will grow. And before I will grow up, because
mm,
it is not a competition and it is not based on a vertical level, I will spread underneath in the dark as far to try to make different connections and to be in that energy of the dirt and that living ecosystem that teaches us so much every day about ways of surviving. So we always think about dismantling patriarchy and destruction as like maybe something physical,
mm,
when the opposite is true. When the moment that you remain in that inhale and exhale exercise of acknowledging your soul and
mm,
your energy and your existence, and when you honor those ancestors, whether they were good or bad,
mhm, mhm,
we come from dark and light.
mhm,
But the moment that you're able to ground yourself in that space, that is the moment when you start giving the middle finger to
mm,
colonialism and patriarchy.
mm, mm. I think that is a perfect way to end this. And I want to thank and appreciate you just sharing space with you in this way, but also before this has been such a gift, and a real blessing. And thank you for reminding us to start with spirit, start with the deep knowing, that already exists. So thank you. And I do believe that one day I will hug you in person.
And this is weaving. It's coming your way.
Aw, Clelia, thank you.
That's how we do. That's how we do. Well, it's
Mhm.
been such an honor to share also the space with you and to be in the presence of Rose. For some reason, she spoke to me, and I'm just so honored. And I will remain in gratitude and in ancestral strength.
Thank you, Clelia. Same.